Hi, and welcome to Chapter 1. So again, CSCI 181, this is your Chapter 1 video. Chapters are going to be separated into sessions, so we're going to do a different video for each session. This is Chapter 1, Session 1. Okay, so we're first going to get started with HTML5. That's the beginning of this chapter. We're going to spend most of this chapter working on HTML5, not really getting into the CSS for the most part, but that doesn't mean you're not going to see some CSS. We are going to have some CSS files in the decks that you're going to be using. So you'll start to get a little bit of visual on it before we get started. First thing we're going to talk about is what is the World Wide Web? A couple of terminologies. This is probably basic information that a lot of you already know. If you're in this class, you probably already know a lot of these things. Doesn't mean it hurts for me to explain it again, just in case there's a couple people who are confused. With the World Wide Web, we separate things into networks. Networks are structures in which information and services are shared among nodes or hosts. So a node or a host is referring to a specific computer or a specific device. Networks combine all of those together. They make them all match, and they can talk to each other and they can compare information. A server is something that provides a service. So server serves a service. So when you think of a server, it's something that gives you information. It's something that holds some information and makes it available for you to be able to retrieve it. So a server provides information or services to other devices that are on its network. So you can have your own personal little network that has a server and has a couple of nodes or hosts, a couple of computers, and they can all talk to each other, and it isn't available to the outside. That would be an intranet or a personal LAN. In this case, we're going to be talking about servers that provide information, like web servers that provide information and websites out. The client is what we call the device that receives that service. So we have a server client server network where we have a server that gives us the information and the client which receives it. So basic. Here's the server, here's the client. You go over to the server, get your information, it comes back, and it shows up on the client. Different types of networks that we talk about a LAN, which is a local area network, which I just talked about, or a WAN, W-A-N, which is a wide area network. The difference between the two is simply how big are they? So a LAN is usually less than about 20, 25, maybe 40, 50 nodes and hosts, whereas a WAN could be hundreds. It could be an entire campus of information, or it could be something that goes even further than that, say all of Great Falls or all of a specific city. The internet is a WAN. It's the largest WAN. Obviously, it encompasses the whole world. So when we talk about the internet, quote unquote, that is a wide area network. The word hypertext. Hypertext is a way that we use to organize information through hyperlinks. These are going to be those links that you have in web pages where you click the link and it goes somewhere. That's called hypertext. We use in this class hypertext markup language, which is a markup language. It's a language that is used to describe or mark up, make prettier the hypertext. So it used to be that you would just have the text of the link and that was all you saw, but we started making it prettier and making it easier for users. So we have created hypertext markup language, which is a language of itself. The World Wide Web is simply interconnected hypertext documents. So there's a server that provides information and it's got a document, and we can click from that document to another document to another document, kind of like Wikipedia. And then web pages. Web page is a document that is stored on a web server. So we have our server, which serves the information. A web page is the document, and they are retrieved via web browsers. So when we talk about your browser, you can have your Chrome, your Edge, your Firefox, your Safari. Any of those are your web browser that are used to read that document. A little history on HTML. So HTML, hypertext markup language, we've talked about that. A markup language is a language that describes content by marking or quote unquote tagging your different elements. When the internet was created, which is not entirely true, when HTML was created, no one really defined the syntax. So everybody kind of had to go their own way as to how they wanted things to look. And it really didn't look very good. It was generally just text with nothing formatted at all. There was no bold, there was no italics, there was no underline, there was no pages, there was no links. It was just syntax, or it was just text. The original version of HTML, HTML1, was the first public version of HTML. It was created in 1989 by the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium. They created what we call a set of standards that define for the browsers how you can expect a web developer to design a page. So when you're looking at a page, if all the web developers agree that this tag means this, it means the browsers go, cool, now we can format it correctly and make people happier. So for about 15 years, we went through a couple of versions. From 1989 through 95 was HTML2. HTML3 came out in 97. HTML4 was in 99, and we kept going until we decided in 2004 that W3C just wasn't moving fast enough. The internet was changing so significantly in that early 2000s that the WHATWG, the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group, decided, you know what, you guys at W3C are not doing your job. We're going to take over. And they developed HTML5 in 2004. They took over, and then by 2012, they created HTML5. HTML5 is what everybody uses now. So they've kind of taken over, and the W3C is kind of in the back. That being said, there are still developers out there that started learning in the 80s and the 90s that are still using basic W3C standards. So you want to make sure when you're writing your website and when you're looking at somebody else's website, say you come in and you have to fix somebody else's, you may look at it and you have to understand those original W3C standards because you're going to see them. They're going to exist. When they're no longer applicable and they don't exist anymore, we call them deprecated. That being said, you're still going to see them. Right now, we use strong to make it bold, but you'll still see the B. So it was always a B tag, and now it's strong. And used to have italicized as I, but now we use EM to make it emphasized. So we use a little bit of different tags, but you're going to see the old ones because they still kind of exist, even though they're deprecated and they don't exist anymore. So it's just a basic little history of HTML and how things have changed over the years. In this class, it's really important that you have the right tools. Now, if you choose not to use Visual Studio Code, that's fine. If you already know a lot about the internet and IDEs and you can bring your own in and you're comfortable with it, that's fine. I don't mind. I don't care. I'm going to be using code. So all of my examples are going to be using code. So Visual Studio Code is a Microsoft product. It's free. We always like our free. You can go to code.visualstudio.com and download the version for your computer. Yes, it works for a Mac. Yes, it works for a Linux machine just fine. It works for a Windows machine, any of the three. And you can use Microsoft Code. We use a lot here at Great Falls College because it does work really well with Java, with Python, with obviously HTML, CSS, Node, anything that we're going to be doing, we can use VS Code. I tend to add 2 extensions to my code. First is called Live Server, which is a server that is running on your machine in Visual Studio Code so that you can run code through a server. So you can choose to do that one. The other is called Live Share. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Live Share in the team meetings and then a little further during week 2. But Live Share is a way for us to share screens and share code while you're working. So if you're having trouble with your code, you can call me up on Teams and you can say, hey, Cheryl, I can't figure this out. And I can say, cool, let's go live share. And you can go in and you can click a little button on your code that says share this code with Cheryl. And then you'll paste a little link in Teams. I'll click the link and I can open up my code on my computer and see your code while you're typing. It's really a convenient extension that I like to use. Again, you're welcome to use a different IDE if you don't like code. That being said, there was just a couple of texts that I wanted to cover. So validation was making sure that there's no syntax errors. And then validators are software that is used to validate. When you use an IDE like code, it will be color-coded. And it will let you kind of know if you've got some basic syntax errors. It'll put a little ugly red line underneath things saying your syntax errors are here. If you see a lot of those red lines, you kind of need to look at your code and figure out what you're doing wrong. You also want to make sure that your tools support the mobile web, which we do. So making sure that you can use mobile requirements because As you know, things have changed in the last 10 years. Everybody's got a smartphone. You want to make sure that your website looks good on a mobile phone. Basics of an HTML document. And we're going to go through this actually looking at one. So I'm just going to kind of glance over this. The first thing we talk about is our doc type. The doc type will tell the browser what standard to use. If I'm going to use an HTML standard, if it's an XML document, if it's a different type of document altogether. So it's really important in your HTML file that you include your doc type. That's always the first line of every HTML file. There are different types of elements that we're going to be using. The first one we're going to talk about is called two-sided elements. Elements that have an open and a closing tag. So tags are in brackets. So they're in angle brackets. So the greater than or less than symbols. And an element tag is where the element is the name of the element. So we're going to talk about different element types, but we're talking about paragraphs or divisions or spans of text or input devices or anchors, a couple of different elements. And we'll talk about what all of these mean as we go along. You always have an open and a close. So in this case, if I have a paragraph, I'm going to have an open P tag where it's a bracket P, close bracket. And then I have all my text that I want to have in my paragraph. And then I'm going to have a closing P tag. So a bracket P or slash P and then close bracket. And that's an open and a close. Those are two-sided elements. Some elements are either one-sided or empty, meaning that there's no content inside of it to put in between two tags. So we can have an open greater than symbol, and then our tag name like break, which is a BR, which is just a hard return, and then a slash angle bracket, and that's going to close it. So it's still open and closed, but it's all in one tag. So those are empty elements or one-sided elements. So some elements that don't have an ending tag, they can just put that slash bracket. If you do not put the slash, it doesn't know that it's closed yet, and it's looking for the end of it. The important thing about elements is that they're nested. They're nested inside of other elements. I always refer to nesting as those Russian nesting dolls where one's inside the other, but it's an entire doll inside of the other entire doll, which is inside of another one. Nested elements have to be completed. So there has to be an open and a closed tag, and everything must be contained within that. You can't have an open bracket or an open tag somewhere in there and then close the tag outside of that nesting. The nesting has to be contained entirely. So we're going to go look at an HTML document and talk about a couple things there. We're going to get started checking out a HTML page. I have Visual Studio Code up, and then I have the tutorial page that we're going to be using throughout this chapter. I've just already loaded it so that you could see where a browser was going to be. So I just have two windows back to back. When you open Visual Studio Code, sometimes you get a start. In this case, I've already closed that down. I'm going to go ahead and open the folder that has the HTML1 tutorial. So in my case, I have all of my student files under my CSCI 181, and then I have my HTML1, which is the one we're doing, and then I have my tutorial folder. I'm going to go ahead and open my tutorial folder. It's going to have all of my files that I need in it for the tutorial for all of these videos, at least for chapter 1. So I'm going to say select folder. And it's going to open them up, and it's going to look something like this. In this case, I already have the start open, but let's assume that I didn't, and it looked like this. One of the things that I want to suggest when you open it up, it may have the settings where it's alphabetized as opposed to by type. To go ahead and set that sort order so that it groups them, I'm going to go ahead and show you real quick. Preferences, settings. Up here, I'm going to type in sort order. And it's going to limit to anything that has the word sort order. In this case, I actually want the first one, which is under Explorer sort order. And I want it to be by type. The default is just going to be alphabetical. So you can see if I put it as default here, it's just alphabetical, CT_about, and then everything goes down alphabetical. But I find working with HTML, I like to have them by type so I can know the difference between my CSS files, my HTML files, and then my image files. So I like to do that. Just a quick little thing. Okay, so to open an HTML document, the example that we're going to use from the book is going to be your start file. So you can look through here and you can find the one that says ctstart.html. And I can go ahead and click that. and it's going to show you your basic HTML file. Now, we've already talked about this a little bit. You've got your doc type at the top. Always have your doc type. Your HTML here and down at the bottom to make sure that those tags are inclusive. You've got your headers here, and then you have your body. And inside of your body, you have headers, nav bar, and then a footer. So you can kind of, even with very little limited knowledge of HTML, you can kind of see how this is going to work. The header stuff, remember, none of this shows except that title at the top, which is going to be this title up here when you look at it. If I want to look at this page, I can right-click on the page anywhere and say open in default browser, which is what I did to get it over here. So if you open in default browser, now I've added an extension called Live Server, which just allows me to do some server things that won't be done automatically in the browser. But in this case, you're welcome to just use your default browser or any other browser and go ahead and look at the page. It should look exactly like this, no matter what browser you're using. Hopefully, looks fine. All right, so you've looked at an HTML document. Let's talk a little bit about the attributes. Attributes are information or details about the element. So if I have a break, there's nothing really you need to know about it. It's just a hard return. It doesn't do anything except make a new line. But if I have a paragraph, I might want that paragraph to have other pieces of information. It might want to follow a specific class type. It might have some other attributes like an ID field. It might have what language is it written in, what styles. We're going to talk about CSS and styles a little further on. But these are different attributes about the tag. You can apply attributes to any tag. Some tags use specific attributes and some don't. So you have to be kind of aware of what are the attributes that go with a tag, what makes sense there. If you have a hyperlink, so an anchor tag, you would put in a reference as to where you want that anchor tag to go. That's an appropriate attribute for an anchor tag. You wouldn't put a href or reference, a hyperlink reference, in a paragraph because the paragraph isn't a hyperlink. It doesn't make any sense. So some attributes are appropriate for some things, some are not, but we're going to be adding attributes. Now, VS Code does this really cool thing where they color code your attributes. So in the VS Code that I have up on the screen right now, the red is the attribute name and the blue is the attribute value in this case because they're strings. Attribute values and attribute names are going to be going together. So you're going to say the ID is equal to something. Important thing with HTML, white space is irrelevant. White space doesn't mean anything. So spaces, tabs, line breaks, by definition, don't do anything. You could put hello, put 5 line breaks, and put world, and they will still put them right next to each other. It treats one line space the same as multiple white space. So it'll just put one space, just like a normal thing. If you want to force an extra space, we're going to use a character code called a non-breaking space, which is an ampersand NBSP non-breaking space and a semicolon, and that's going to add extra spaces. We'll end up doing that in this chapter. In the tutorial section of your book, we're going to talk about how to begin writing an HTML page. Now, in this case, they have not given you the CT_about. You have to write that yourself. So we're going to come up here to a new file under our tutorial. I'm going to click new file. It's going to give me a little space here. I'm going to go CT_about, and I'm going to call it an HTML page. And when it's an HTML page, it knows that it's HTML. You can see it down here at the bottom as well. So it knows that the IntelliSense is going to work for you. In this case, we're going to start with our doc type. And as you can see, I've written a lot of HTML. The IntelliSense knows who I am, and it was able to automatically pop that in for me. Next, I'm going to write my HTML tag. One of the convenient things about IntelliSense is I can hit the tab button to have it fill in, close the tag, and it automatically adds a closing tag after that. So you can see I have my open tag and my close tag, and I have to have them both because all of our tags, remember, we have to have an open and a close, and everything has to be nested within it. I can make my header. Again, it's going to give me a closing tag, and I can make my body and get my closing tag. So this is your basic HTML file, and if I save this, Control S is save, and I say open in my default browser, over here it's going to pop up, and there's nothing there. Well, of course there's nothing there. I didn't put anything in the page. So, but the page ran and it's up and it's doing just fine. So that is your basic HTML file. Now, as we move along, we're going to be adding pieces of information to the header, adding pieces of information to the body. But just for kicks and grins, hello world, and I can save it, then I can refresh this page. And as you can see, it'll say hello world on the page. So we're obviously not going to put hello world in our about page, but that gives you an idea. As we're changing things here, save it, Control S. You can always come up to File and hit Save directly. I like to hit Control S because it's faster. And then come over here and just hit refresh and it should be fine. All right, so first part about an HTML document. You've made your doc type and now you're going to build the header or the head of your HTML document. We'll talk about the body in a second. In the header, there's a couple of things in here you want to keep track of. The first is the title. So the title is what that little tab is when you open a new website. If you don't set the title, it's not going to show anything, or it's just going to show the URL for the website, but it's not going to show you anything specific. So we always like to give our pages a title. Next, we have things called metadata. Metadata is data about data about the page. So what kind of things do we want to know about the page? We want to know what the character set is. The character set is really important because it tells you what characters are appropriate for this web page, and you can change them. In general, we're going to be using UTF-8, but you can always change those around. We're going to use things like a viewport, which is how big do I want the screen to be? Or we might have in there keywords, which are things that bots are going to search for. We also can have things in here that are links to style sheets. We're going to be doing that a lot in this class. So all of your pages are going to be linking to style sheets. What we like to do with that is you can link your style sheets and it will apply them in order as it goes down the link. So in this case, it would link the base style sheet first and then the layout one style sheet after that. So there's a little bit of description here on the metadata elements and how you can use those, the ones that are going to be in your header. Let's go look at what that looks like. So according to the tutorial, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a document title. The titles always go inside the header. So we always put them inside head. And we're going to type in title. And as you can see, I can close my tab, but my mouse still stays in between the two tags. So I can just start typing and it makes it really convenient. And we're going to write about curbside tie. And that's going to be my title. When I hit Control Save and hit refresh, you'll notice up here, the title, which shows in the tab, is already there. The rest of it's still blank because we removed our hello world, but the title was there. The next thing we're going to do is add some metadata. So metadata is data about the page. So metadata, we're going to tell it what character set we want to use. In this case, we're going to use UTF-8, which is a pretty standard meta type or character set that most people are going to use. And you'll notice that I put a slash and a close bracket because we need to make sure that we close that meta tag, but we don't need to have an opening and closing tag because there's no content. It's an empty attribute. We are also going to have, a meta, and we're going to tell our keywords. So this is really important when you are worried about making a site that other people can find on the internet. Keywords are found by bots, as we've talked about. A-U-R-A-N-T, there we go. In Charlotte and food. And with those meta tags, that means that when somebody goes into Google or Bing and they try to search for Thai restaurant in Charlotte, this will be found by those search bots and be able to use that. So that is our metadata. We're also going to be adding comments. And the last part of chapter 8 is going to be on comments. You have to add comments to your code. It's really, really important, not just for me as an instructor to know that you wrote the code and what date did you write it and some other information about it, what the file name is, but it's just important in general. You want to be adding comments to your code so that anybody else who looks at your code knows what on earth you were doing. In HTML, documents comments are a angle bracket, exclamation mark, and 2 dashes. When you type them, it will automatically add at least Visual Studio Code will automatically add the other 2 dashes, and closing bracket, the same way it does with any other tag. So it does that for you. Comments in VS Code are always in green. So if you opened a comment tag, but you didn't close it, you'll notice that all of your code just turned green. Not good. It means you have to go close your comment tag. So that's why the color coding is really useful. Comments in HTML are a bracket, an exclamation mark, and 2 dashes. So you can make comments and then you can add in your comments here. So here I would have you write your name so that I know that you wrote your code. Sorry, new keyboard. The date that you wrote the code. So we could say 8/15/2020. Maybe the file name. In this case, it's ct_about.html. And what the page does, like a description. This is the about page. Something like that. I want to always have you put some semblance of comments in there because they're really important for keeping track of your code. Okay. So that's it for session 1 of chapter 1. Please go on to session 2 as soon as possible. I try to break these down a little bit so that you don't have to sit for an hour and a half. But if you can go straight on to session 2, we're going to keep going, start working on the body tags and dealing with that. So don't forget to do the quick check. Make sure that you go in, open a Word document, answer those 7 questions or so in the quick check, and save that because you're going to be turning that in at the end of chapter 1.